Persian Gulf, 47 nautical miles off the Iranian coast. March 14, 2007, 3:22 hours. The USS Virginia, SSN 774, moved through the dark water like a predator that had forgotten how to breathe. At 300 feet below the surface, the submarine's anechoic tiles absorbed every sound that tried to escape its hull. Inside, the control room glowed with a dim red light reserved for night operations, casting long shadows across the faces of men who had been submerged for 23 days. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Vance stood behind the sonar station, her eyes fixed on the waterfall display cascading down the screen. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Chun sat motionless at the console, headphones pressed against his ears, listening to the ocean's secrets. "Contact bearing 270, range for 1,000 yards, Chun whispered, his voice barely audible even in the hushed atmosphere of the control room. "Surface craft, multiple screws, diesel engines. Count is 7 distinct contacts." Vance leaned closer. "Classification? Small coastal vessels. 15 to 20 meters. Speed 6 knots. They're running without navigation lights." Chin adjusted a dial, refining the acoustic signature. "Ma'am, these match the profile we've been briefed on. Dhows, traditional smuggling craft." Captain Robert Hendricks emerged from the navigation plot table, his weathered face expressionless. At 52, he'd spent more years underwater than most submariners spend in the Navy. This was his 4th patrol in the Gulf, but the first under these particular rules of engagement. "Battle station, silent running," Hendricks said quietly. The order rippled through the boat like an electric current. Men moved to their positions without urgency, without noise, just the practiced efficiency of crew that had drilled the scenario 100 times. "Helm, come to course 265, depth 200 feet. 5-degree up angle. Nice and easy." "Aye, sir, coming to 265, depth 200. The Virginia began to rise, climbing through the thermocline layers that would mask her approach. Hendricks moved to the periscope station, though he wouldn't raise it yet. Not until they were certain. "Con, ESM. I'm picking up cell phone signals from the surface contacts. Multiple devices. Arabic language traffic." Vance glanced at the captain. "They're coordinating." "Or reporting," Hendricks replied. "Distance to contacts?" 3,000 yards and closing, sir." In the cramped radio room, 3 decks below, cryptologic technician 2nd Class Amanda Rodriguez sat hunched over her equipment, capturing every electronic emission from the surface. Her screens displayed real-time translations of intercepted communications, processed by NSA algorithms and cross-referenced with a database of known insurgent networks. Intercept log. 3:27 and 14 seconds universal time coordinated. Lang, Arabic, Gulf dialect. Source, mobile device encrypted level 2. Translation, 7 boats confirmed. Cargo secure. ETA to drop point 40 minutes. Allah willing, the Americans are sleeping tonight. Rodriguez keyed her headset. Con radio. Intercept confirms cargo transfer in progress. They're headed for a coastal drop point. Coordinates correlating with suspected weapons cache near Bandar Lenja. Hendricks studied the tactical display. 7 boats on the surface. Somewhere ahead, maybe more waiting to receive the cargo. Weapons, explosives, maybe advanced IEDs destined for Iraq. The intelligence pipeline had been tracking this network for 8 months, watching, listening, mapping every node. Tonight was a culmination of that patience. "Captain, we have authorization to interdict?" Vance asked. Hendricks pulled a sealed envelope from his breast pocket. He'd been given it before they left port, with explicit instructions. Open only when target package confirmed. He broke the seal and read the brief message inside. His expression didn't change. "We're authorized to disable and mark," he said. "Non-lethal interdiction. We make them disappear, but we don't sink them." Vance blinked. "Sir, SEAL delivery vehicle is already deployed from the dry deck shelter," Hendricks continued. "Lieutenant Ramirez and his team have been in the water for 20 minutes. They'll handle the close work. Our job is to make sure nobody sees them coming. 6 kilometers to the northwest. Senior Chief Petty Officer Jake Ramirez gripped the controls of the sealed delivery vehicle as it glided through the black water at 40 feet depth. Behind him, 5 other SEALs sat in the cramped, flooded cockpit, breathing from their rebreathers, invisible even to each other in the total darkness. The SDV was essentially a miniature submarine, open-topped, flooded, and slower than hell, but it was silent, and tonight, silence was everything. Ramirez watched the navigation display, counting down the meters to their target zone. His earpiece crackled with the encrypted burst transmission from Virginia. Shadow 2, this is Mother. 7 surface contacts confirmed. You are clear to execute Phase 2. Good hunting. Ramirez clicked his transmit button twice. Acknowledge. The SDV began to rise, and Ramirez could see the faint shimmer of moonlight penetrating the surface above. He brought the vehicle to periscope depth, just a sensor mast breaking the waves, and activated the thermal imaging camera. 7 boats, spread across 2 kilometers of open water, each one low in the water, heavily loaded. No visible weapons, but that didn't mean they weren't armed. Smugglers in these waters always carried AKs, RPGs, sometimes heavier stuff. Targets acquired. Ramirez whispered into his comm, beginning approach. He submerged again and brought the SDV to within 200 meters of the nearest dhow. Then he gave a hand signal, and one by one, his team exited the vehicle, disappearing into the dark water like ghosts. Aboard the lead dhow, Hassan Al-Kuwaiti stood at the bow of the Alfar, scanning the horizon with night vision binoculars he'd bought from a Turkish arms dealer. The sea was calm tonight, the wind light, perfect conditions. In 6 years of running cargo through these waters, he'd never been intercepted. The Americans patrolled further north, near the Strait of Hormuz. Down here, they were invisible. How long to the beach? He called back to the helmsman. 30 minutes, inshallah. Hassan nodded. Below deck, the cargo was packed tight. Crates of Chinese-made anti-tank mines, Iranian-manufactured EFBs, explosively formed penetrators, and 60,000 rounds of 7.62 millimeters ammunition, enough to keep the resistance supplied for months. Every boat in the convoy carried similar loads. This was the biggest run they'd attempted. He swept the binoculars across the water again. Nothing, just the other boats, their silhouettes barely visible in the moonlight. Then something changed. The engine on the boat to his starboard, the Nor, coughed once, then died. Hassan frowned. Ahmed, the captain, was experienced. He wouldn't let his engine fail during a run. Hassan raised his radio. Ahmed, what's wrong? Static. Ahmed, respond. More static, then a brief crackle. Nothing intelligible. Hassan felt the first cold finger of unease trace down his spine. He turned to his helmsman. Slow down. Something's wrong. Before the helmsman could respond, their own engine began to sputter. The deep, rhythmic thrum that had carried them for hours suddenly became erratic, choking, gasping like a dying animal. Then it stopped. Complete silence. Hassan spun around. Across the water, one by one, the other boats were going dark. Engines failing. Lights extinguishing. In less than 2 minutes, all 7 boats sat dead in the water, drifting with the current. What the hell? Hassan! One of his crew pointed over the side. Look! Hassan rushed to the rail and stared down into the water. At first, he saw nothing. Then the moonlight caught something just beneath the surface. A dark shape, moving smoothly past the hull. Too large to be a dolphin. Too streamlined to be a shark. His blood went cold. Submarine, he whispered. Then louder. Submarine. Panic erupted across the boats. Men shouted, grabbed weapons, fired wildly into the water. Bullets stitched the surface in useless patterns of white spray. Hassan screamed at them to stop, but it was too late. Discipline had shattered. And then, as quickly as it started, the chaos ended. Because every man who looked into the water saw the same thing. A massive black shape, longer than their boats, deeper than seemed possible in these shallow waters, passing directly beneath them with terrible, inhuman grace. The submarine didn't surface. It didn't attack. It just watched. And then it was gone. Hassan stood frozen at the rail, his radio clutched in his trembling hand. Around him, His crew had fallen silent, their faces pale with terror. Across the water, the other boats drifted, engines dead, crews paralyzed. They were 20 kilometers from shore. No engines. No way to call for help without revealing their position to American surveillance. They were ghosts now, floating in the dark, waiting for something they couldn't see to decide what happened next. Aboard USS Virginia. Stevie is clear and recovering, Vance reported. SEAL team reports all 7 targets disabled. Fuel line severed. Engine control systems compromised with microcharges. No casualties. Hendricks nodded, marked their positions, dropped the beacons. From Virginia's torpedo tubes, 7 small devices were launched, each no larger than a soda can. They rose to the surface and attached themselves magnetically to the hulls of the disabled dhows, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for them. Each beacon transmitted on a frequency monitored by U.S. and coalition naval forces. By dawn, patrol boats arrived to find the smugglers still adrift, their cargo intact, and no explanation for how their engines had failed simultaneously except one. Something had been hunting them in the dark, and it was still out there. Bandar Abbas, Iran. Safe house. March 15th, 2007, 11:47 hours. Kareem Basiri sat in the back room of the mechanic shop, chain-smoking cigarettes while 3 other men argued in heated whispers. The small space smelled of motor oil, stale bread, and fear. Outside, the sounds of the city continued oblivious. Car horns, merchants calling, the afternoon call to prayer echoing from a nearby mosque. But inside this room, a different kind of prayer was being offered. The prayer of men who'd just seen their entire operation disappear overnight. 7 boats, Hassan said again, his voice hoarse from repeating the story. 7 boats, Kareem, all dead in the water, within minutes of each other. And we all saw it. Something under the surface. Something big. Kareem crushed his cigarette into an overflowing ashtray. He was 53 years old, a former officer in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, before he transitioned to more profitable, less official work. For 12 years, he coordinated smuggling operations throughout the Gulf, moving everything from cigarettes to surface-to-air missiles. He dealt with Coast Guards, rival smugglers, even U.S. Navy destroyers on patrol. But submarines? In these shallow waters? It's impossible, he said flatly. American submarines operate in deep water. Everyone knows this. The Gulf is too shallow, too crowded. Their big boats can't maneuver here. Then explain what we saw. Hassan shot back. His hands were still shaking. 24 hours after the incident, the man looked like he'd aged 10 years. Explain how all 7 engines failed at once. Explain the shape in the water. Ahmed, captain of the Noor, spoke up from the corner. He'd been silent until now, but his eyes held the same haunted look. It wasn't just the engines, Kareem. Our electronics went dead. GPS, radios, everything. And there was a sound. What sound? Ahmed struggled to find words. Like singing, very high-pitched. You couldn't hear it so much as feel it. In your chest, in your teeth. And then everything stopped working. Kareem felt the first tendril of real concern work its way through his skepticism. He'd heard stories from other smugglers over the years. Boats found adrift, crews missing, cargo intact but unexplainable equipment failures. He'd always dismissed them as superstition or incompetence. But 7 boats, experienced crews, and all of them telling the same story. Where the boats now? Impounded, Hassan said bitterly. Coalition patrol boats found us at dawn. We couldn't run, couldn't hide. They towed us to international waters and handed us over to the UAE authorities. We lost everything, the cargo, the boats, $3 million in weapons and equipment. And the crews released. The Emiratis didn't want an international incident, but they kept the cargo. Hassan leaned forward. Kareem, someone set us up. Someone fed intelligence to the Americans. They knew exactly where we'd be, exactly when, and they sent a submarine to hunt us. Kareem stood and walked to the grimy window, looking out at the street below. A submarine in the Persian Gulf. It seemed absurd, yet he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. It rang 4 times before connecting. Yes. The voice on the other end was curt, professional. This is Basiri. I need information on American submarine movements in the Gulf. Recent deployments, new capabilities, anything unusual. There was a pause. That's a dangerous question, Kareem. I'll pay the usual rate. Double if you have something solid. Another pause, longer this time. There are rumors. Nothing confirmed. Some of my sources in Bahrain say the Americans have been testing new submarines. Smaller, quieter. Designed for shallow water operations. But it's just talk. Nobody's actually seen them. Until now, Kareem muttered. What? Nothing. Get me everything you can. Names, capabilities, locations. I want to know what we're dealing with. He ended the call and turned back to Hassan. You said you saw coalition patrol boats at dawn. Which ones? American destroyer, I think, and 2 UAE fast attack craft. Did the Americans board your boats? Hassan shook his head. No, they stayed back. Just watched. It was the Emiratis who did the boarding and towing. Kareem processed this. If the Americans had intelligence on the smuggling run, they could have intercepted it traditionally. Destroyer on the surface, helicopters, special forces. Instead, they'd send a submarine to disable the boats and then let their allies handle the arrest. Why? The answer came to him slowly. Deniability. A submarine left no evidence. No video footage. No witnesses beyond traumatized smugglers whose stories would sound like fever dreams. The Americans could operate with impunity, hitting targets without leaving fingerprints. And if they'd done it once, we need to warn the others, Kareem said. Every network, every route. The Americans have changed the game. They're not just watching from satellites anymore. They're under the water. CIA Station, Manama, Bahrain, March 16, 2007, 14:20 hours. Special Agent Jennifer Clark sat in the secure conference room, watching the intelligence summary scroll across the screen. Behind her, 4 other CIA officers reviewed the overnight SIGINT intercepts from across the region. They're talking, one of them said. Smuggling networks from Dubai to Kuwait are lighting up. Everyone's heard about the 7 boats. Clark smiled. That was exactly what they wanted. Operation Ghost Tide wasn't just about interdicting one weapon shipment. It was about creating psychological warfare. Make the smugglers afraid of the water itself. What are they saying? Lots of conspiracy theories. Some think it was Iranian special forces double-crossing them. Others are convinced the Israelis have secret submarines. But the smart ones... The officer pulled up a translated transcript. The smart ones are putting it together. They're talking about American submarines operating in shallow water. Good, Clark said. Let them talk. The more paranoid they get, the slower their operations become. Fear is a force multiplier. Her deputy, Michael Torres, leaned back in his chair. The Navy's asking if we want to run another op. They got 3 more target packages ready to go. Smuggling routes in the northern Gulf. Weapons transfers near Basra. Clark considered this. Ghost Tide had been a proof of concept. Could Virginia-class submarines operate effectively in the shallow, crowded waters of the Persian Gulf? Could they disable targets without being detected? The answer, apparently, was yes. But there was a risk in overusing the tactic. Each operation increased the chance of exposure, of a sub being photographed, or worse, confronted by Iranian naval forces. Tell the Navy we'll authorize 2 more operations, Clark decided. But spread them out. 1 in 3 weeks, another in 6. We want the smugglers constantly looking over their shoulders, but we don't want them adapting. And if the Iranians figure it out, Clark's expression hardened. Then we deny everything. As far as the world knows, our submarines are exactly where they've always been. In deep water, nowhere near the Gulf. These boats fail because of bad maintenance, criminal incompetence, or divine intervention. Take your pick. Tehran, Iran, IRGC Naval Intelligence Headquarters, March 18, 2007, 9:15 hours. Commander Reza Afshar read the report for the 3rd time, his frustration growing with each pass. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard, Corps, Didn't like mysteries, especially mysteries that occurred in waters they considered their territory. 7 smuggling boats, disabled simultaneously. Coalition forces on scene within hours. No evidence of conventional attack. No witnesses beyond the smugglers themselves, who told stories that sounded increasingly impossible. His assistant, Lieutenant Hosseini, stood waiting for instructions. What do the smugglers claim again? Afshar asked. They say they saw a submarine. Sir, American, they believe. They say it passed beneath their boats and somehow disabled all their engines at once. With what? Magic. Hosseini hesitated. They mention electronic warfare, sir. Some kind of pulse that disrupted their systems. And acoustic weapons. Afshar tossed a report onto his desk. Acoustic weapons. Electronic pulses. It all sounded like science fiction. Yet, the Americans have been investing heavily in non-lethal warfare technologies. He'd seen classified briefings about active denial systems, electromagnetic pulse weapons, and yes, acoustic devices designed to disrupt human targets. Could they have miniaturized such systems for submarine deployment? Pull everything we have on American submarine technology. Afshar ordered, particularly their newest class. What do they call it? Virginia class. I want to know its capabilities, its operational depth, its acoustic signature, everything. Sir, most of that intelligence is classified at the highest levels. Then we'll pay for it. Afshar snapped. We have sources in the West. Use them, and put our own submarines on alert. If the Americans are operating in the Gulf, I want proof. Real proof, not smuggler fairy tales. After Hosseini left, Afshar stood and walked to the window overlooking Tehran's sprawling cityscape. In the distance, the Alborz Mountains rose against a cloudless sky. Somewhere beyond those mountains, across the waters of the Persian Gulf, American submarines might be prowling waters that have been Iranian territory since ancient times. The thought made him angry. But underneath the anger was something else. Fear. Because if the Americans could disable 7 boats without being seen, what else could they do? How many submarines were out there? What were they watching? What were they planning? He picked up a secure phone and dialed the office of Admiral Fadabi, commander of the IRGC Navy. Admiral, this is Commander Afshar. We need to discuss the incident in the Southern Gulf. I believe we have a serious problem. Aboard USS Virginia. Submerged. March 20th, 2007, 22:34 hours. Captain Hendricks stood in the control room, reviewing the mission orders that had just come through on the YLF antenna. Extremely low-frequency communications were painfully slow. It took minutes to transmit even a short message, but they were the only way to reach a deeply submerged submarine without it coming to periscope depth. Operation Ghost Tide. Phase 3 authorized. Target package, Alpha 7. Location, 29 degrees 17 minutes north, 48 degrees 41 minutes east. Time frame, 22 March 0200 to 0400 local. Rules of engagement, non-lethal interdiction. Priority, high. Another smuggling convoy. This time, 11 boats. The intelligence suggested they were moving Iranian-made rockets, 107 millimeters, probably destined for Shia militias in southern Iraq. XO, laying a course of the target area, Hendricks said, silent running. I want us in position 12 hours before the intercept window. Aye, sir. As the Virginia changed course, Hendricks felt the weight of what they were doing settle more heavily on his shoulders. They were writing a new chapter in submarine warfare, operating in shallow, hostile waters, conducting special operations without ever surfacing, becoming a ghost story that insurgents would tell around campfires. But ghost stories had a way of becoming real, and when they did, people got hurt. He thought about the 7 smugglers they'd left drifting 3 weeks ago. None of them had died. None had even been injured. But the terror in their eyes, the way they'd fired blindly into the water, that wasn't something you could plan for. That was what happened when you introduced a new kind of fear into the world. Somewhere in the Gulf, insurgents were changing their patterns, avoiding certain routes, staying closer to shore, looking over their shoulders at every ripple in the water. That was the goal. Disrupt, intimidate, make them afraid to operate. But Hendricks wondered, how long before they adapted? How long before someone got lucky and captured proof? How long before this invisible war became very, very visible? He didn't have answers, only orders. And in 4 days, they'd be hunting again. The USS Virginia held position at 200 feet, drifting like a sleeping steel whale. Lieutenant Commander Vance watched the sonar waterfall display paint acoustic pictures of the world above. Con, sonar. Multiple surface contacts bearing 045, range 9,000 yards. Petty Officer Chin reported. Count as 11 distinct targets. Small coastal vessels, diesel engines, 7 knots. Captain Hendricks moved to the tactical display. 11 boats, exactly as intelligence predicted. Crypto, what are they saying? Rodriguez stream translations. Quote, "Are we sure the waters are clear? I heard what happened to Hassan's convoy." Response, "That was Southern Gulf. The ghosts don't hunt here." Vance glanced at Hendricks. "They're scared, but not scared enough to cancel," he replied. "Battle stations, silent running. We're getting ahead of them." He reviewed the operational orders. Non-lethal interdiction. Secondary objective, psychological impact. SEAL team ready, Captain, Vance reported. "Hold the SEALs," Hendricks said. "We're going to announce ourselves." Aboard the lead dhow, Al-Rashid, Mahmoud Al-Takriti stood at the helm, crew checking cargo for the 10th time. Below deck, 60 crates of 107mm rockets destined for Mahdi Army fighters in Basra. He'd heard the stories. Ghosts in the water, 7 boats vanishing. But American submarines didn't operate in the northern Gulf. Too shallow, too crowded. The ghosts were just stories. "How much longer?" young Samir asked. 2 hours to the drop point, Mahmoud replied. "There are no ghosts." But his eyes swept the dark water nervously. USS Virginia, 1,200 yards from convoy. Weapons. Warm up the acoustic countermeasure system, Hendricks ordered. The ACS could make a submarine sound very, very loud when it wanted to. All boats within range, Captain. Hendricks took a breath. Activate ACS. Full power. Let's introduce ourselves. From Virginia's hull, powerful transducers emitted a deep, resonant tone. A prolonged, bass-heavy sound rolling through the water like the song of some enormous creature. The sound of a predator announcing the hunt had begun. Aboard the Al-Rashid. Mahmoud heard it before he felt it. A deep thrumming from everywhere and nowhere. Then louder, deeper, vibrating through the deck plates into his bones. "What is that?" Samir whispered, terror in his eyes. The sound resonated in Mahmoud's chest, made his teeth ache. Around the convoy, boats reacted. Engines throttling, crews shouting, confusion spreading. The sound came from below. "Oh, God," Samir breathed. "It's real. The stories are real." The radio crackled. "All boats. We need to scatter. Now." The sound stopped. Total silence. Then, one by one, the engines began to die. USS Virginia. SEAL team has disabled 6 targets, Vance reported. Teams 2 and 3 engaging remaining boats. 16 Navy SEALs moved through dark water, attaching small-shaped charges to fuel lines. Designed to disable, not destroy. All targets dead in the water, Captain, Chin confirmed. 11 boats, 70 insurgents, enough weapons for a month of attacks. Neutralized in 10 minutes. No shots fired. No casualties. Just fear. Deploy marker beacons, Hendricks ordered. The insurgents would drift for hours, staring at the water, wondering what was down there. "They're panicking," Rodriguez reported. "Multiple calls for help, but they won't transmit positions. Too afraid of surveillance." "Let them be afraid," Hendricks said quietly. "That's the whole point. Bandar Abbas, Iran, safe house. March 23rd, 2007. Kareem Basiri stared at his phone, face pale with rage and fear. 6 coordinators sat in stunned silence. 11 boats, 70 men, all weapons intercepted. Not one saw what attacked them. Hassan nodded grimly. "The Americans have weaponized fear itself. We need to stop them," another growled. How do you fight something in 3 dimensions while stuck on the surface? Hassan shot back. Kareem pulled out intelligence reports purchased at considerable cost. This is the Virginia-class submarine. Nuclear-powered, nearly silent, equipped with technology that makes us look like children. Then we're finished. No, Kareem said sharply. We adapt. We change routes. Hug the coastline inside the 12-mile limit, where submarines can't follow without risking exposure. We use decoy boats. Force them to make choices. Ready for what? Kareem's expression hardened. To show them that even ghosts can bleed. CIA Station, Manama, Bahrain. March 25, 2007. Jennifer Clark watched satellite feeds of captured boats being towed to port. Total interdiction. Torres reported. 60 crates of rockets, 15,000 rounds, 50 pounds of C4. Those rockets would have killed a lot of people. What's the chatter? Off the charts. Ghost Tide achieved exactly what we wanted. Widespread fear, operational disruption. But they're adapting. Route changes, smaller convoys, increased use of Iranian territorial waters. The Iranians? They've increased submarine patrols. Their Kilo-class boats are more active. They're looking for us. Let them look, Clark said. What about next phase? Navy wants a sustained campaign, 1 interdiction per week for 3 months. Clark considered carefully. 2 more operations. Then we evaluate. The moment this becomes routine, it becomes vulnerable. USS Virginia, March 27, 2007. Hendricks reviewed after-action reports. 18 boats interdicted. 0 casualties. Hundreds of weapons stopped. So why did he feel uneasy? Vance entered with priority intelligence brief. His expression darkened reading it. Summary: networks adapting. Route changes. Decoys. Iranian territorial waters. IRGC increasing patrols. Ghost Tide effectiveness declining. Risk increasing. What do you think? He asked. We've made them afraid. But scared animals are dangerous. And the Iranians? If they're actively hunting us, the rules get complicated. Hendricks nodded. Tell CENTCOM we're ready for 1 more operation. Then we pull back. Give the enemy time to forget. And then we come back. Hendricks smiled thinly. Ghosts don't stay dead forever. Somewhere out there, insurgents were loading boats, trying to outwit an enemy they couldn't see. And submarines were watching, waiting. The war beneath the waves had only just begun. The Iranian submarine Targ moved through dark waters at periscope depth. Commander Reza Afshar stared at the sonar display, hunting for ghosts. For 3 weeks, they found nothing. 18 smuggling boats disabled, all with identical characteristics. Simultaneous engine failure, acoustic disturbances, no visual contact. American submarines, operating where they shouldn't exist. Commander, I have something, the sonar operator whispered. Bearing 270. Very faint. Too quiet for surface vessel, but something's there. Afshar's pulse quickened. Come right to 270. Silent running. The turret crept forward. 5,000 meters. 4,000. The contact was moving slowly, deliberately masking its signature. Sonar, go active, Afshar ordered. I want a clear picture. The pulse erupted. The echo returned seconds later. Contact confirmed. Virginia-class nuclear attack submarine. Range for 1,000 meters. Absolute silence in the control room. They'd found it. Deep inside Iranian territorial waters. USS Virginia, 4,800 meters away. Con, sonar. Submerged contact. Kilo-class submarine, Iranian Navy. Captain Hendricks felt ice flood his veins. The scenario they've been dreading. They've pinged us, Chin reported. They know we're here. Lieutenant Commander Vance appeared. Sir, we're inside the 12-mile limit. We should abort. Hendricks looked at the tactical display. The convoy, 11 boats loaded with weapons, was 6 kilometers ahead. Between them and the target, an Iranian submarine, tracking their every move. Helm, take us deeper, he ordered. We're going to slip past them. The Virginia dove beneath thermal layers. Minutes later, the communications buoy returned orders. Abort mission. Withdraw immediately. All stop. Rig for ultra-quiet. Hendricks commanded. The submarine became a hole in the water. Reactor at minimum power. Crew frozen like statues. Multiple surface contacts. ESM reported. Iranian fast attack craft converging. 20 minutes out. Hendricks studied the chart. Come right to course 220. Ahead dead slow. We're going to thread between them. Sir, that takes us deeper into Iranian waters. Sometimes the best way out is through. Iranian submarine Tariq. Commander, we've lost a contact. Afshar stared in disbelief. One moment the American submarine was there. The next, nothing. They must have stopped, gone ultra-quiet, the operator explained. They'd had the Americans dead to rights. And now they'd vanished like actual ghosts. USS Virginia, 4 hours later. Dawn light, filtered through the periscope camera. 16 nautical miles away. Iranian ships still searched waters of Virginia, had left hours ago. They'd crept north, hugging the bottom, using every submariner's trick. Now they were outside territorial waters, exhausted but safe. Vance approached. What about the convoy? The weapons shipment? Hendricks checked the intelligence feed. The boats had made their delivery. Somewhere in Iraq, insurgents were unpacking rockets. Mission failure, he said quietly. But we're alive, and we avoided an international incident. Was it worth it? Hendricks thought about 18 boats successfully interdicted. Hundreds of weapons stopped. Lives saved. But also about the Iranian submarine that found them. The growing risk. The certainty that eventually luck runs out. I don't know. Ask me when this war is over. CIA station Manama, Bahrain. April 16, 2007. They know we've been operating submarines in the Gulf. Admiral Keating said flatly. Jennifer Clark nodded. What's the recommendation? Suspend submarine-based interdictions. Shift to traditional surface operations. How many boats did we interdict during Ghost Tide? 18 confirmed. Estimated lives saved, 200 American and coalition personnel. Clark let that sink in. 200 families who'd never know a submarine crew saved their loved one. Then it was worth it, she said quietly. Was it? Or did we just escalate tensions with Iran? Clark had no answer. Epilogue, Arlington National Cemetery. March 15, 2009. Captain, retired. Hendricks stood before grave. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Vance, USN. Killed by an IED 8 months earlier. An IED built with explosives that came through the Gulf on a boat Ghost Tide had intercepted. He'd aborted that mission to avoid confrontation with an Iranian submarine. And weapons got through. Could he have done anything differently? He didn't know. I'm sorry, Sarah, he whispered. I'm sorry we couldn't stop them all. Somewhere in the world, submarines still prowled. Wars still raged. Operators still made impossible decisions. That was the nature of the invisible war. No clear victories. No certain answers. Just ghosts, hunting other ghosts in the dark places where the public never looked.